I always liked to take a look at garage sales when I had free time. That Saturday, I was driving through a quiet neighborhood when I saw a handmade sign indicating a sale right ahead. It seemed common, like so many others, so I parked the car and decided to check it out. I thought I would find old furniture, books, or maybe used tools, but it wasn't quite like that. When I entered the covered garage, the first thing that caught my attention was the absurd amount of magazines and DVDs stacked in improvised boxes and shelves. Most of the material was clearly adult content, and there was so much that it reached the ceiling. The place had a strange smell of mold mixed with old paper, and the whole scene made me uncomfortable immediately. While pretending to look absently at some boxes, I began to feel a greater discomfort. There was practically nothing but that kind of material, as if it were an obsessive collection that had taken over the entire garage. It wasn't the kind of thing you expect to see in a regular garage sale. The absence of other normal items left me with the feeling that I shouldn't be there. That's when I heard a door open in the back, connected to a room in the house. A man appeared, wearing simple clothes, but with a fixed and disturbing look. He didn't say anything at first. He just watched me in silence for a few seconds, as if he was evaluating my reaction. Then he forced a smile and spoke calmly. "I have more in the basement, if you want to see." At the time, I felt a chill run down my back. The way he said that didn't seem like any invitation, but almost a trap. The tone was too calm, but the gaze remained heavy, fixed on me. I tried to disguise it, answering with a nervous smile that I was just taking a quick look before continuing my journey. He kept standing at the door, blocking part of the view of what was behind him. It didn't look like a salesman excited to get rid of things, but someone who had pleasure in displaying that bizarre collection. For a few seconds, I didn't know if I should leave right away or pretend to be interested so as not to seem rude. The silence that followed only made the situation more strange. I decided to put my hand in my pocket as if I was going to get my wallet, but in fact I just wanted to hold the car key. He said he might come back later, trying to sound casual. The man didn't answer, he just kept watching me with that strange smile. When I took a step towards the exit, I had the feeling that he was about to say something again, but he didn't say anything. As soon as I went out into the street, I took a deep breath and realized that I was sweating cold, even with the mild weather. I walked quickly to the car and started the engine as quickly as possible. While maneuvering to leave, I looked through the rearview mirror. He was still at the back door of the garage, standing in the same place, watching me until I turned the corner. On the way back, I couldn't stop thinking about what I had seen. The collection itself was already strange, but that man's behavior was what really made me restless. There was something wrong in the whole scenario, as if it wasn't just a garage sale, but a pretext to attract people there. The fact that he insisted in the basement only reinforced the feeling of danger. Later, I discussed the situation with a friend, who told me he had heard stories about people using sales ads to set up ambushes. That made me freeze inside. I had no proof of anything, but the memory of that stuffy garage, the piles of boxes, and the man standing at the door kept hammering in my mind like a silent alert. To this day, when I go through a garage sale, I can't avoid the feeling of distrust. I always think about what could have happened if I had agreed to enter that basement. Maybe it was just an even bigger collection, or maybe it was something much worse. I'll never know, but the memory of that smile and the way he didn't take his eyes off me still accompanies me. If there's one thing I learned from this experience, it's that not every ad or garage sale is as innocent as it seems. Since then, I always think twice before entering strange places alone. And you, would you have the courage to follow someone to a basement in such a situation? Story 2. A friend and I decided to stop at a garage sale that advertised rare antiques. I thought it could be fun, maybe even find some interesting piece to decorate my apartment. But as soon as we arrived, we realized that it was not at all what we expected. The backyard was full of old and broken objects, scattered in a disorganized way, with nothing that really looked old or of value. What caught my attention the most were some signs leaning against the walls, with weird phrases about world order, and symbols that I had never seen before. In some parts, there were strange flags hanging, creating a heavy and uncomfortable atmosphere. The whole place seemed less like a sale, and more an accumulation of bizarre things organized on purpose to scare. While we tried to pretend naturalness by looking at the objects, we realized that the seller did not move from the place. He was standing next to the balcony, holding a camera and filming every step we took. It didn't seem like a casual attitude, like someone registering their own sale, but something calculated. His gaze was fixed, following our movements in a way that made me restless from the first moment. My friend whispered for me not to react, but you could feel her nervousness too. The strangest thing was that there was no other customer in the backyard, just the two of us. That feeling of being the only people there, under the eyes of a man who recorded everything in silence, made my stomach turn. I was already thinking about how to get out of there without raising suspicions. We decided to pretend that we were still interested, commenting loudly on some objects as if we were evaluating the purchase. Every time he glanced, he continued with the camera pointed, without blinking, without saying a word. It was as if the simple fact of filming us was more important than selling anything. After a few minutes, my friend approached a box with old books, and I realized that many of them had notes on the margins, with symbols and disjointed phrases. This only increased the feeling that we were not in a common sale, but within the space of someone completely obsessed with disturbing ideas. I tried to smile and thank him for the exhibition, already walking slowly towards the gate. He didn't answer, he just turned the camera, following our movements to the exit. Each step seemed to weigh tons, as if we were trying to escape from something that could go wrong at any moment. My heart was beating fast, and I just thought about not running, so as not to draw even more attention. When we finally crossed the gate, I took a deep breath, but the bad feeling didn't go away. When I got into the car, my friend poked me discreetly and pointed back. The man was still standing still, filming, even after we left. I started the car as soon as possible, and we left there without looking back, with the impression that he was still watching us from afar. On the way back, we were silent for a long time. It was as if the two were trying to process what had just happened. It was not only the strangeness of the objects or flags, but the fact that someone filmed us that way for no reason. That behavior seemed to me much more like a collection of information than a garage sale. Later, I commented to other people about what happened and discovered that, in that region, stories of individuals using fake sales to attract people to their land had already circulated. I don't know if this was the case, but the feeling of being observed and registered against our will continues to haunt me to this day. In the following days, I became paranoid, always looking around when I got home. I even had the impression of seeing a car stopped on the corner, but I could never confirm if it was someone following us or just a coincidence. What didn't leave my mind was the image of him standing with the camera, recording every detail as if it had a greater purpose that I never understood. To this day I avoid stopping at unknown garage sales, even if they seem common. The memory of that backyard full of broken objects, the strange flags and the silence of him watching me accompanies me every time I think about the subject. And you, would you have the courage to continue in a place like this while someone films you in silence all the time? Story 3. I've always liked to look for tools in garage sales. You can often find good parts for a low price, so I usually stop every time I see a sign. One Saturday morning, I entered a sale organized by an elderly couple in a quiet neighborhood. At first glance it looked like one of those common sales, with old furniture, clothes folded in boxes and kitchen utensils scattered around the backyard. While looking for the section where they had left tools, I began to notice some strange items mixed on the tables. There were empty medicine bottles, burned electrical cables, and even broken dolls. It was then that I noticed, in a corner of the table, a transparent plastic bag full of used soaps, some stained and worn, as if they had been collected from different bathrooms. At the time, my stomach rapped. That didn't just seem strange, it seemed wrong. Who would keep used soaps in a bag, much less put them up for sale in a garage? While I was trying to look away, the old man realized that I was looking and started laughing, a dry laugh, almost as if he had expected that reaction. With a casual tone, he said, "They're still good. Nobody likes to waste." The phrase kept echoing in my head in an uncomfortable way. His smile didn't look like that of someone who made an innocent joke, but of someone who really believed in it. The most disturbing thing was the way he kept his gaze fixed on me, as if he was trying to measure my reaction. My immediate desire was to drop everything and get out of there, but I tried to stay calm. I shook my head with a forced smile and pretended to keep looking at other items. The couple watched my every move in silence, as if they expected me to ask something about that bizarre bag. The environment, which before seemed just messy, began to give me a feeling of suffocation. I took a screwdriver from a toolbox just to look like I was interested in something. The woman, who until then hadn't said anything, took a few steps closer and said, "We have more things inside the house if you want to see." The way she spoke, almost whispering, made my whole body alert. I thanked him quickly and said I was just passing through, trying to sound polite. But the weather got even weirder. The man laughed again, this time in a lower way, and kept looking at me as if he was provoking me. I couldn't take my eyes off that bag of soaps, wondering where they came from, why they were there, and who in their right mind would keep something like that. As I walked towards the exit, I realized that the woman had returned to the balcony, but kept watching me motionless. The man, in turn, remained leaning against the table, smiling in a way that left me with the feeling of being tested. The fine rain that was starting to fall only increased the urgency I felt to leave as soon as possible. When I finally got to the car, I closed the door tightly and locked the locks, even though I knew there was probably no immediate reason for it. I started it quickly, but before leaving, I couldn't resist looking in the rearview mirror. The man was still there, standing in front of the table, with the transparent bag in his hands, lifting it as if he were showing me once again. That image was engraved in my mind as I drove away. It was not only the absurdity of someone selling used soaps, but the way he seemed to have fun with the discomfort it caused. It was as if the couple was pleased to see people's reaction to that scene. It made me more disturbed than anything else that morning. Arriving home, I tried to forget the episode, but to this day I find myself thinking about what was behind that sale. Did the couple do that on purpose, just to scare? Or did they really believe that someone would buy those things? The way they invited me to enter the house, and the insistence on observing me left me with the feeling that I escaped from something bigger. Whenever I see a garage sale sign now, I think twice before stopping. The memory of that bag full of used soaps still gives me goosebumps. And you, would you have the courage to continue exploring that sale after hearing his sentence and realizing that you were being watched all the time? Story 4. I used to love visiting garage sales, mainly because I always found old toys interesting. That Saturday morning, I found a box full of them in front of a seemingly common house on a quiet street. I got excited, knelt down and started flipping through the items, wondering if I would find something rare or at least fun to decorate my room. While I was concentrated looking at the box, I felt that uncomfortable feeling that someone was standing behind me. It was different from when someone just passes by or watches at a glance. It was a fixed, heavy presence that didn't move. When I turned around, I saw a tall man, shirtless, wearing only pajama pants and an open robe, standing less than a meter away. He said absolutely nothing. He just stood there, looking at me as if he was waiting for some reaction. The silence was so strange that I could hear my heart racing, muffled only by the sounds of the street. His look didn't look like a casual salesman taking care of a garage sale, but of someone who was analyzing my every move. I tried to force a polite smile, like someone who thanks for looking at the items, but my hands began to tremble. I put the toys back in the box slowly, trying not to show panic, but the situation was getting unbearable. The fact that he didn't look away and didn't say anything left me completely with no way out. I decided that the best way out was to simply get up and leave without giving explanations. I did it as calmly as I could, but each step seemed dragged. The man followed my movements with his eyes, without moving a muscle, as if he was testing how far I would go. That neutral expression, combined with absolute silence, made me more uncomfortable than if he had said anything. When I finally crossed the gate of the house, I felt a huge weight come off my back, but I didn't have the courage to look back. I walked quickly to the car, trying to keep my breathing stable. Only when I closed the door and turned the key did I allow myself to face the rearview mirror. And there he was, still standing, watching me the same way as before, motionless in the backyard. That scene stuck in my mind all the way back. It was as if his silence was more threatening than any word. I kept wondering if he acted like that with all the people who stopped there, or if, somehow, he had directed that behavior specifically to me. The detail of the open robe, in the middle of the morning, only made everything even more bizarre. I told some friends what happened, and everyone had the same reaction. Why didn't you run away right away? The truth is that, at that moment, I didn't want to provoke any unexpected reaction from him. I preferred to act as if nothing was wrong, but deep down, I knew I was facing something that wasn't just strange, it was scary. To this day I avoid thinking about what would have happened if I had made any comment, or if I had reacted differently. I never went through that street again, and since then I've been much more selective with this kind of sale. The memory of that man standing still, in absolute silence, still gives me goosebumps whenever I see someone wearing a bathrobe. I learned in the worst way that danger is not always obvious. Sometimes, someone's simple behavior is enough to trigger all internal alarms. And you, in my place, would you have been able to stay calm, or would you have run away at the same time? Don't leave yet, the scariest story is still ahead. If you're enjoying these, subscribe now. Welcome to Dark Hours. Story 5. I organized a garage sale on a weekend to get rid of some things that were accumulating space. It was a busy day, many people stopped to look, and most looked like ordinary people, buying books, clothes, and utensils. But in the middle of all this, I noticed a strange car parked across the street. Inside, there were two people who never got out to look at anything, they just watched for a long time. At the time, I thought it was weird, but I didn't give it so much importance. I kept taking care of the sale until the end of the day, and ended up forgetting that detail. But that same night, I woke up with a loud noise coming from the living room. When I went down to see, I realized that the back door had been broken into. My belongings were scattered and several things had disappeared. The police were called, but all they could do was record what happened. There were no cameras on my street, and none of the neighbors had seen anything during the night. I was terrified, trying to understand how someone could have chosen just my house. That's when I remembered the strange car that had been parked in front on the day of the sale. I spent the following days reviewing every detail of that Saturday, trying to remember if someone had asked too many questions, or if they seemed interested in something other than the items on display. It was a horrible feeling to realize that maybe I myself had opened the doors for those people to enter, by showing up close to the house and what was inside. A few days later, a neighbor told me that he had seen two people wandering around the neighborhood at night with flashlights, just the same week as the robbery. He described the duo and hit exactly the appearance of the buyers who went through my garage sale. That's when the plug fell for good. They had used the sale as an excuse to observe the house and plan what to take. That information only increased my sense of insecurity. If they had already returned once, what would prevent them from coming back again? I spent nights without sleeping properly, waking up to every noise, afraid that they were outside again. The peace I had inside my own house simply disappeared. I began to take precautions that I had never considered before. I installed extra locks, bought security cameras, and even an alarm system. Even so, I couldn't feel totally protected. Every time a car slowed down in front of my house, my heart shot. I ran to the window to check, always hoping to see that vehicle parked on the other side of the street again. As the weeks went by, nothing more happened, but the feeling of vulnerability remained. The idea that someone may have walked through my rooms while I was sleeping moved me in a deep way. More than the stolen objects, it was the invasion itself that left me marked, as if my house was never really mine again. To this day, when I see garage sale signs in the neighborhood, I feel a chill. I never imagined that something so common could be used by people with bad intentions to choose their next victims. What should have been just a way to get rid of old things ended up becoming the reason for the worst experience I've ever had inside my own house. After that day, I learned to distrust even the most trivial situations. I've never organized a sale again, and I hardly participate in one. It's scary to think that someone can use this kind of opportunity to observe their life closely. And you, would you trust to open your house to strangers after hearing a story like this? Story 6. I put some old furniture for sale in a garage sale to free up space at home. Early in the morning, a man who seemed normal appeared, bought one of the chairs and left without talking much. I thought it would be just another common customer, like so many others who had already been there. But a few hours later, to my surprise, he came back. This time, I didn't want to buy anything. He said he would like to just take another look at the inside of the house, to check if I didn't have any more interesting things that weren't listed. That sounded strange to me at the time, so I politely refused, saying that only the items in the backyard were for sale. His smile disappeared, but he didn't insist. He just turned his back and left silently. At first, I tried not to give it so much importance, but that situation kept hammering in my head. His request to enter the house seemed more like an excuse than anything else. I kept thinking about how he could be trying to evaluate the interior for something other than shopping. Although the refusal was firm, the expression he made before leaving did not leave my mind. 2 days later, while I was arriving from work, I noticed a car passing slowly in front of my house. I immediately recognized the driver. It was the same man. He didn't stop, he just slowed down and turned his head, looking directly at the living room window. That made my stomach turn. In the following days, the scene began to repeat itself. Always at different times, I saw his car shrinking in front of my house. Sometimes he didn't even bother to disguise it. He slowed down and turned his face to face the window directly, as if he wanted me to know he was there. It was disturbing to think that someone who should only have been another buyer now seemed obsessed. I began to feel watched even inside the house. I avoided staying too long in the living room and kept the curtains closed as much as possible. The simple sound of a car slowing down on the street already made my heart race, because I couldn't avoid the idea that it was him again, passing slowly as if it marked me somehow. One night, I even heard the sound of footsteps on the gravel near the side fence. I ran to the bedroom window, but I didn't see anyone, just the shadow of his car parked a few meters ahead, as if I were waiting. That was the limit for me. I locked all the doors and spent the rest of the morning awake, trying to decide whether to call the police even without having concrete proof. I told the situation to some neighbors the next day, and one of them confirmed having seen the same man passing slowly down the street at night. This detail made me even more tense, because it meant that it wasn't just my impression. He was really wandering around, watching, and made no point of hiding. Over time, he stopped appearing, but the feeling of vulnerability never left me again. I don't know if you gave up, or if you simply found another place to fix your attention, but to this day I close the curtains before even dark and rarely leave something for sale in front of the house. The memory of that car slowing down on my street was marked as a constant alert. The most disturbing thing is that there was never a clear explanation for what he wanted. Was it just a strange interest in furniture, or was there something much worse behind that insistence? Since then, I've learned to distrust even the most banal interactions. And you, would you have let him into your house when you asked, just to take a look? Story 7. I've always liked to visit garage sales in large houses, because it was usually where you could find older and more interesting things. On a Saturday morning, I decided to stop at one of these sales in a remote neighborhood. The house looked old, but well cared for on the outside, with tables full of utensils, clothes and books scattered around the backyard and the internal corridor. I came in curiously, thinking I could find something different. While walking through the narrow corridor of the house, I noticed a door that clashed with the others. All were open, showing rooms full of boxes and furniture for sale, but that one was locked with a rusty padlock. It seemed out of place, as if it wasn't part of the sale. The wood of the door was marked, full of scratches that, at first glance, looked like scratches. That caught my attention in a strange way. My curiosity spoke louder, so I asked the owner of the house if there was something for sale in that room. He answered almost immediately, with a firmness that did not match the friendly tone he had used until then. "This room is not available." The dry way you said made me uncomfortable, as if I had invaded a limit that I shouldn't. I tried to disguise it and keep looking at the other items, but I couldn't stop thinking about that locked door. The scratches on the wood were not superficial, they looked like deep marks, as if someone had used force to try to get out of there. The more I watched from afar, the more it seemed that the owner wanted to keep me away, which only made my imagination worse. I decided to circulate around the house pretending to be interested in other things, but I always cast quick glances at the corridor. The owner seemed to be attentive to my every move. It was as if he knew exactly what I was thinking. Every time I approached that part of the house, he appeared nearby, offering forced explanations about other objects for sale, as if trying to distract me. At a certain moment, I pretended I was going towards the kitchen, but I discreetly returned to take a closer look at the door. That's when I realized that, in addition to the scratches, there were also dark marks near the latch. I couldn't tell if it was rust or something else, but that only increased my feeling that there was something wrong. The heavy silence of that corridor contrasted with the noise of the sale happening in the rest of the house. At that moment, I heard footsteps behind me. It was the owner of the house again, standing with his arms crossed, looking directly at me. He didn't say anything, but the message was clear: I shouldn't be there. I muttered any excuse about looking for the way out and walked away quickly. Still, I felt his gaze accompanying me until I got back to the backyard, where other people circulated normally. While pretending to look at the books on one of the tables, I realized that the back door of the house was slightly open, revealing the same corridor as before. For a moment, I had the impression of hearing a muffled noise coming from there, something between a drag and a rhythmic knock, as if it came from inside that locked room. My whole body was on alert, but when I looked again, the owner was already closing the door tightly. I left there trying to act naturally, but inside I was restless. It was impossible to ignore the details: the old padlock, the deep scratches, that muffled noise. Everything indicated that there was something beyond simple objects stored there. I still thought about commenting with someone else who was on sale, but I didn't have the courage. Who would believe me without proof? That night, lying in bed, I was going over the scene several times in my head. The abrupt way of the owner, the way he appeared whenever I got close to the corridor, and especially that muffled sound that seemed to come from behind the door. The feeling was that I had witnessed something I shouldn't have, but I left before I understood what was really happening. In the following days, I couldn't get that house out of my head. I even passed by a car on the street on purpose, just to observe from the outside. The gate was always closed, and there seemed to be no movement, as if no one lived there. This only made everything even stranger, considering that during the sale there were several people circulating in the backyard. I told the story to a friend, and her reaction was immediate. "You should have called the police." But I wasn't sure what I had seen myself. What if it was just my imagination? What if those scratches were old, and the noise had come from somewhere else? The problem is that, even trying to rationalize, something in me said that there was something hidden behind that door. Over time, I tried to put the subject aside, but whenever I pass near old houses and see closed doors, I immediately remember that scene. The owner's serious face, the rush to move away, and the muffled sound that echoed behind the padlock still come back to my memory clearly. It was one of those situations where everything inside me screamed that there was something wrong, but I didn't have the courage to insist on finding out what. To this day, I wonder what could be hidden in that room. Were they just old things, saved so as not to be seen? Or was there something more disturbing behind those scratches and the heavy silence of the corridor? And you, in my place, would you have the courage to force an answer, or would you do like me and leave without looking back? Story 8. I've always liked to stop at garage sales when I'm driving back from work. That Saturday, I wasn't looking for anything special. I just wanted to spend a few minutes looking at old things. That's how I found a small teddy bear thrown into a box along with broken toys and old books. It was dusty, but it still had that aspect of something that was once part of someone's childhood. The lady who organized the sale said she could take it for $1, and I ended up taking it, more on impulse than on necessity. When I got home, I left the teddy bear on the kitchen table along with other little things I had bought. It was only at night, when I was already putting everything away, that I noticed something strange about him. The sewing seemed to have been redone in a hurry. The yarn was not the same color as the fabric, and some parts were hard, as if there was something inside that was not common filling. That intrigued me. I've never been the paranoid type, but I kept thinking why someone would sew a children's toy in such a sloppy way. I took a pair of scissors from the drawer and decided to open a piece to see what was inside. I thought I could find some lost object or even hidden money, as it sometimes appears in stories on the internet. What I didn't expect was to find an electronic component. Inside the teddy bear, there was a small camera, the size of a thumb, connected to a wire that led to a kind of transmitter. It looked like something old, but still very strange to find inside a toy. It wasn't just a loose piece of metal, it was clearly a device placed there on purpose. My first thought was that maybe it was part of some kind of interactive toy, but I soon discarded this idea. There was nothing childish in that equipment. The transmitter had a short antenna and was slightly oxidized, which indicated that it was not new. Even so, it gave the impression of having been used more times than I would like to imagine. That didn't seem like an innocent project. I spent a few minutes just looking at the wires, unable to process the situation. It was as if suddenly a banal object had turned into something threatening. The feeling of discomfort grew quickly. I remembered that the toy was mixed with random things in the sale, but now I wonder if it wasn't put there on purpose. Did you know what you were selling? Or had someone left that teddy bear in the middle of things without her noticing? The more I thought, the more goosebumps I felt. I decided to search online about hidden cameras and toys, and found disturbing reports. In some forums, people commented on how it was relatively common to use plush toys to hide surveillance devices. The difference is that this usually appeared in criminal cases, and never in a simple garage sale toy. That's when I realized that maybe that teddy bear had a much darker story than I imagined. During that night, I couldn't sleep well. Every time I closed my eyes, I thought about who would have held that toy before me. Had someone been watched without knowing? Had that been used in a real house, in a children's room, or even in some kind of scam? These questions were spinning in my mind, and no answer left me alone. The next morning, I decided I needed to get rid of that, but simply throwing it in the trash didn't seem right. Part of me was afraid that it was still working, that someone somewhere was somehow connected to it. I put the camera and the transmitter in a separate box and thought about taking it to the police, but I was afraid they wouldn't take my story seriously. While the box was in my living room, I swear I had the impression of being watched. I know it sounds irrational, but every time I passed by it, I felt a strange weight, as if there was something there that shouldn't be. In the end, I put the box in the trunk of the car and left it there for 2 days, without the courage to touch it again. Finally, I took everything to a small police station in the region. The policeman who attended me didn't seem surprised. He just said he would forward it for analysis. I don't know if they really investigated, but at least he wasn't with me anymore. Still, to this day I feel uncomfortable whenever I go through a garage sale. I never looked at used toys in the same way again. The memory of that teddy bear haunts me to this day. Not because of the object itself, but because of the feeling that there are hidden stories in the most banal places. Whenever I see an old plush on some shelf, I wonder how many secrets can be sewn inside it, waiting to be discovered by someone unsuspecting like me. Story 9. I organized a garage sale on a Saturday, and in the late afternoon, I started to put away the last boxes. That's when I realized that a man was still standing at the gate, even after I had already announced that I was closing. He didn't seem interested in anything specific, he just stood there, watching in silence. When I asked if he needed anything, he replied that he wanted to just look one more time. That already made me uncomfortable, but I tried to stay calm and said that the sale had ended, that I could come back another day if I wanted. He didn't insist, but he didn't seem satisfied either. He was silent for a few seconds before turning his back and leaving slowly. I closed the gate soon after, relieved to have ended that strange moment. At night, I was already at home, lying in the room, when a movement on the street caught my attention. The curtain was ajar and, when I looked outside, I felt my body freeze. It was the same man. He was standing on the sidewalk, under the light rain, staring at my window. He did nothing but stay there, motionless, as if he expected me to react somehow. My first instinct was to turn off the light, but that only increased the dread, because I was sure he knew I was looking. I closed the curtain with trembling hands and was silent, trying to hear any sound coming from the street. The noise of the rain mixed with the accelerated beat of my heart made it impossible to distinguish if he was still there. After a few minutes that seemed like hours, I gathered the courage to peek again through the crack in the curtain. He was still there, exactly in the same place, without moving. It was like I had all the time in the world to wait. There was no umbrella, there was no raincoat, only him standing, soaked, staring at my window. The scene was so absurd that my body locked. I took my cell phone to call the police, but at the same time I wondered if I wasn't exaggerating. What could I say? A man is standing on the street looking at me? When I finally decided to call, I looked again at the sidewalk, and he was no longer there. The street was empty, only illuminated by the poles and the water accumulated on the asphalt. I spent the rest of the night awake, waiting to hear some noise at the gate or in the backyard. Every time the wind hit the windows or the rain got stronger, I shrank, imagining that he could have come back. I looked out the window countless times, but the street was still deserted, as if nothing had happened. Still, the feeling that she was being watched didn't go away. The next day, I mentioned what happened to a neighbor. To my surprise, he said he saw a man standing on the corner of the street around the same time, but he thought it was just someone waiting for a ride. The detail is that it described the appearance exactly as I remembered. It was at that moment that I was sure that I hadn't imagined anything. In the following days, I was on alert, paying attention to every car that slowed down on the street and every unknown face that passed through the neighborhood. Fortunately, I never saw that man again, but the memory of him standing still, under the rain looking at my window continues to haunt me to this day. It's a kind of image that is engraved in the mind, impossible to erase. To this day I don't know what he really wanted. Maybe it was just curiosity, maybe something worse, but the truth is that I'll never be sure. This experience taught me to distrust even the most trivial situations, such as a simple garage sale. And you, would you have called the police that night, or would you do like me, expecting the worst in silence? Story 10. But don't leave yet, because something unexpected comes after this one. I've always been attracted to garage sales ads with low prices, so when I saw one that promised total liquidation, I decided to stop by to check it out. It was on a quiet residential street, nothing that drew attention. When I arrived, the garage was open, with tables organized like in any other sale. But the detail that bothered me right away was that there was no one around. I looked around, hoping to see someone appear from the house or the backyard, but everything was too quiet. I decided to take a few steps inside, trying to see the items on the tables better. It was at that moment that I heard the gate behind me closing with a sharp bang. The noise echoed in a way that made my heart race. I turned quickly, hoping to see someone outside, but the street was empty. The gate, which was previously propped up, was now completely closed, as if it had been pushed hard. I tried to convince myself that it could have been the wind, but the air in that garage was completely stopped. That's when I noticed the background illuminated by a single lamp, swaying slightly from a loose wire. Underneath her, there was only an empty chair, positioned in the center as if someone had just gotten up. The scene seemed set up on purpose, as if it were a scenario waiting for the reaction of those who entered. My whole body was on alert. That wasn't normal, it wasn't an ordinary garage sale. I took a few hesitant steps to the chair, trying to understand if that was some kind of joke or trap. The floor was marked with dark spots, difficult to identify in the twilight, but that made me feel even more uncomfortable. The lamp swayed slowly, creaking on the ceiling, illuminating and hiding the corners of the garage at irregular intervals. Every time the light moved, it seemed that something could be hiding in the shade. I tried to call, saying a hello, half voiceless, but no one answered. The echo of my own speech made me even more nervous. I felt my skin shiver when I realized that, despite the silence, there was a clear feeling of not being alone in there. I can't explain why, but it seemed like someone was watching every step I took. My instinct told me to leave immediately, but when I went to the gate, I realized that it wouldn't open easily. I pushed hard, but it seemed stuck somehow. Despair began to take over, and I returned running my eyes through the garage trying to find another way out. It was at that moment that I realized something even stranger. One of the tables was full of random objects, but among them there were keys, clocks, and even glasses that seemed to have belonged to other people. It was impossible not to connect the dots. That wasn't an ordinary sale. It was as if it were a deposit of things left behind, but by whom? And why? The idea that other people could have passed by exactly the same place gave me goosebumps. I couldn't reason properly anymore. I just wanted to get out of there anyway. I forced the gate once more, until it finally gave way with a loud snap. I left in a hurry, without looking back, with the feeling that at any moment someone could appear from that house or that backyard. When I reached the sidewalk, I realized that the street was still completely deserted, as if there were no residents nearby. That silence, broken only by the sound of the wind, made me even more disturbed. I ran to the car and slammed the door hard, trying to calm down. My hands trembled as I turned the key in the ignition. In the rearview mirror, I saw the garage lamp still swinging, irregularly illuminating the empty space. That's when I realized, with a chill down my spine, that the chair was no longer empty. I started the car without thinking twice, without the courage to check again. The quick image I saw was recorded. Someone sitting in that chair, motionless, as if he was already there all the time, just waiting for me to notice. I drove nonstop until I got home, and only when I locked the door behind me I could take a deep breath. I never trusted ads with prices too good to be true again. That garage seemed to have been set up on purpose, and to this day I wonder what would have happened if I had stayed a few more minutes. Would you risk entering an empty garage just because you saw a cheap ad? You've made it to the end. Thank you for listening until now. But before we close, I have one last story for you. I've always liked garage sales, especially for the surprises we find in the middle of so much old stuff. That Saturday, I bought some cheap paintings in a simple neighborhood sale, nothing out of the ordinary. I took everything home without giving much importance, just thinking about reusing the frames. At night, I started cleaning the picture frames and realized that one of them was much heavier than the others. The wood was worn, with a strong smell of humidity. I decided to take it apart to see if it still worked, when I noticed that there was something stuck behind the protective paper. When pulling, I found a folded photograph hidden inside the frame. I unfolded the photo, and took me a few seconds to understand what I was seeing. It was the facade of my own house. The image seemed to have been taken from the sidewalk, right in front of the gate, on a rainy night. The lights on the pole reflected in the puddles of water, and you could clearly see my closed curtains in the living room. The detail that scared me the most was realizing that that photo was not recent, but it didn't look so old either. The paper was yellowed at the edges, but the quality was good enough to show details of the street, such as the parked neighbor's car. This made me think that it had been taken not many years ago, maybe even a few months. My heart raced. I had never seen that photo before, and for sure, no one in my family had the habit of going out photographing the facade of the house in the middle of the rainy dawn. I started thinking about who could have taken that, and, especially, why someone would hide the image inside any frame sold in a garage. I looked at the back of the photo, hoping to find some date or annotation, but there was nothing written. Just the moisture mark, as if it had been stored for years somewhere forgotten. What disturbed me was to imagine that, at some point, someone was in front of my house, under the rain, recording it in silence. I spent the rest of the night trying to remember if, at some point, I had seen someone strange standing on the street, perhaps watching the house. But nothing came to mind. The photo seemed at the same time so familiar and so out of place, as if it were a memory that I should never have found. The fact that it was hidden inside a frame made me even more restless. The next day, I went back to the garage sale to ask about the origin of the picture frame. The woman who organized the sale said that they were things from her aunt's basement, who had recently passed away, and that she had never touched the frames herself. From the way he answered, he didn't seem to know anything. This only increased my doubt about who had put that photo there. I came home even more uncomfortable, taking the photo with me, not knowing if I should keep it or get rid of it. At one point, I thought about throwing it away, but something made me hesitate. It seemed wrong to discard, as if it were a clue to something I still didn't understand. I left her inside a drawer, but I couldn't stop thinking about her all day long. That night, before going to sleep, I went to the window and looked at the street, trying to imagine where exactly the photo had been taken from. The perspective hit perfectly with the sidewalk in front, right next to the lamppost. For a moment, I had the impression of seeing a shadow standing at that point, motionless. I blinked quickly and there was nothing, but the feeling that someone had already been there came back strongly. In the following days, I began to notice more the movement of the street. Any car stopped for longer, anyone walking slowly in front of the gate made me alert. I didn't get to see anything out of the ordinary, but the photo remained as a silent proof that, at some point, my house had been targeted by someone who was watching closely. I showed the photo to a friend, who immediately said I should take it to the police. But the truth is that I had no way to prove anything but an old image without date or signature. They probably wouldn't do anything. Still, just the fact that someone else confirmed that the photo was disturbing left me with the feeling that I wasn't exaggerating. To this day, the photo is still stored inside a box in my room. I never went back to participating in garage sales with the same enthusiasm, because I always think about what may be hidden behind apparently common objects. That image of my house, taken by someone I don't know, still haunts me every time I walk on the sidewalk at night. I don't know if it was a coincidence, if someone took the photo without bad intentions, or if there was something more sinister behind it. What scares me is imagining that maybe there is still someone out there with other photos I've never seen. And you, in my place, would you keep this photograph as proof or get rid of it forever? Thank you very much for your company until the end. Your support is what gives life to this channel. If these stories have caught you, don't forget to leave your like and comment on your opinion. And if you are not yet part of our community, sign up now to receive the next real horror stories.